Alright, this is my Sentential Logic 3, which I'm going to talk about how to translate English to SL. Now, I have one thing here which I want you to disregard as of right now. So, first of all, as I turn you to the board, ignore this for now, I'll explain it. We have a unary connective, which is the negation, which says not A ampersand B, which is A and B in English, a wedge B, which is A or B in English, a horseshoe B, which is if A then B in English, and a triple bar B, which is A if and only if B in English, and triple bar breaks down to A horseshoe B parens ampersand B horseshoe A parens, and because the horseshoe goes both ways with this. Now I refer you again to the logic book, which pretty much is probably, I think, the best one to go to. Where did I put my eraser? For this. Now, ignore this for now. I'm going to erase this and give you a primer one. Now, first of all, we have a object language. And the object language is, of course, English, because we are trying to get to SL. Okay, we are trying to we have our object language English, and we are trying to get to SL. Our target language is, of course, SL, and our meta language is regimented English. So, given the ampersand, the and, there are words like but, and however, although, and a lot more to indicate that the connective is the ampersand. There are lots of words also for the wedge, like either or neither nor. But there's the big cheese for an infinity of possible words which can hint at this connective is the horseshoe. There are a ton of different words which could lead to indicating the fact that there is a horseshoe, which is what makes up the connective. And triple bar is as well. Now we have S horseshoe N, A horseshoe C. Now, this is the sufficient condition, and this is the necessary condition. Now I say that because in your translating from English to SL, you will see words like sufficient and necessary. I've included one here. And if you see the word necessary, what follows the word necessary, you know, is on the other side of the horseshoe and not on the previous side. If you see the word necessary, you mean it's on this side. However, if you see the word sufficient, it's on this side, because the antecedent affirms the consequent. And there are different words which indicate at the horseshoe connective, different words which can indicate it to be either the consequent or the antecedent. It's just something that, there are a ton of them, and I couldn't possibly go over all the different words, and I'm only kind of giving you 8. It looks like there's only 7, but I'm going to give you one right now. Bill will go to the party only if Sue will. Now, there's one rule of thumb here. When you see that big word, that big thing, only if. If you see just if, then what follows the if is the antecedent. Remember, antecedent affirms the consequent. And if you just see if, then whenever follows the if goes on this side. However, since we have only if, what follows only if goes on this side. Whatever follows the words only if is the consequent. And since we have that word, we know, and if you see if and only if, then you know it's a triple bar. It's this. But we don't have that right now. Bill will go to the party only if Sue will. So we know that the fact that Sue will go to the party is on the other side. So I assign a sentential letter B to mean Bill will go to the party. And then we know it's a horseshoe. And I assign the letter S to be that Sue will go to the party. And since we have the only if, we know that the fact that Sue will go to the party goes on the consequent side of the horseshoe. Now, down to this second problem, which I had given, it's given S, T, and B. Given Sam, Tom, and Bill. At least one will graduate. At least one. That's complicated, okay? It gets complicated. This one and plus this one are two complicated problems. Now, I kind of have written all this out, which is, and I have this written out because my battery died. And the whole thing is that I'm going to explain this here in a bit. At least one, Sam, Tom, or Bill will graduate. So I assigned the sentential letter S here to mean Sam will graduate. I assigned the sentential letter T to mean that Tom will graduate, and I assigned the sentential letter B to mean that Bill will graduate. So this at least one means a lot, and it tells you your whole thing. And we know that at least one leads to this big wedge. At least one leads to disjunction. It leads to ors all over the board. So at least one. It means that it could be all three of them do, or just two of them do, or just one of them do. But it is not possible that none of them do. So we have this first bracket, which is Sam will graduate and Tom will graduate and Bill will graduate, or Sam and Tom will graduate but Bill will not graduate, or Tom and Bill will graduate but Sam will not graduate, or Sam and Bill will graduate and Tom will not graduate, or Tom will graduate and those three are the possible that two of them graduate, and now we're down to the ones. It is possible, or Tom will graduate and Bill and Sam won't. Sam will graduate and Bill and Tom won't. Bill will graduate and Sam and Tom won't. So it isn't possible that all of them don't graduate. It has to be at least one, which means it could be all three, or two of them, or one of them. So that's why this is so long. It's just like a big chain of disjuncts. And somewhere we would have to, given the system, we would have to put parentheses around 1, 2, 3, 4. You have to put parentheses somewhere to make to adhere to the system rules of SL. But I'm not going to worry about that. So I'll leave that one there. Given, I'll actually have to erase this. So hopefully you got it. Given Sue, Sam, and Dan, I'll change the Sam. I'll change the Sam to Tim or Tom. Given Tom, just so I have the different letters. Given Tom, Sam, and Dan, at most two will graduate. Given Tom, Sam, and Dan, at most two will graduate. Now I assign the sentential letter T to mean that Tom will graduate. The sentential letter Sam for Sam will graduate. Now after this it'll get more simple, I promise. And the sentential letter D for Dan will graduate. Now, among these, it's at most 2. So, which means that it could be a combination of 2 among these 3, or it could be one of these, or none of them. So, I guess this one is kind of difficult. So I hope I don't mess up. And if I do, please tell me, because this is kind of a complicated thing. But I want to illustrate how important it is to know how to symbolize at most 2 or at least. And I think I did good on the at least one, but we'll see here. At most 2. So we have either Tom and Sam graduate, but not Dan. Or Sam and Dan graduate, but not Tom. Bracket. Or Tom and Sam, Sam and Dan. No, I just need T and D. Or Tom and Dan do, but not Sam. I don't need a bracket there. Okay, so now we have, these are the 2s. The at most is 2, so we have 2 of them, 2 of them, 2 of them. And we have to have, or, we have to have 1s. Or, Tom does, and Sam doesn't, and Dan doesn't. Or, Sam does, and Dan doesn't, and Tom doesn't. Or, Dan does, and Sam doesn't, and Tom doesn't. Or none of them do. This is possible that it's none of them. Or Tom doesn't, and Sam doesn't, and Dan doesn't. So given the at most 2, at most means it could be none of them. It could be none of them. It could be one of them, or it could be 2 of them. So hopefully I've kind of shown the at least or at most words, and depending on whether it's at most 2 or at least 1 as to how many it is, it changes. But and there are different ones, and that's just very important to kind of know. So now erasing this one, so I have room for the number 4. If Dan doesn't go to school, then neither will George. So this is really easy. Now we know that given if then it's going to be a horseshoe. This is about the easiest indicator of a horseshoe connective ever. So we know that given if means that what follows if is a part of the sufficient condition or the antecedent, and whatever follows then is part of the consequent or the necessary condition. So I'm gonna assign the letter D to mean that Dan goes to school. Slap a tilde on there. Shitty tildes. Tilde. Then George. And I'm assigning the letter G for George goes to school. I need room for that tilde. So if Dan doesn't go to school, then neither will George. So if not D, then not G. That's how you would symbolize that one. Onward and upward. It will rain in Florida, and I have FL and GA to symbolize the states. It will rain in Florida and Georgia if it will rain in Louisiana. I just had the state abbreviation, so I didn't have to write it. It will rain in Florida and Georgia if, big word there, it will rain in Louisiana. So since we have the word if, we know that this is, again, a horseshoe. It's a material conditional. And since we have if and not only if and not if and only if, we know that what follows this if is a part of the antecedent. So I'm going to use the letter L to symbolize it will rain in Louisiana. So if it rains in Louisiana, then I'm going to symbolize F for it'll rain in Florida, and G for it'll rain in Georgia. And we have to put an ampersand since we have this and here, which is obviously the ampersand. Boom. If it rains in Louisiana, then it will rain in Florida and Georgia. That's how we would do that one. It's just very important to notice where the ifs and the thens are, where the only ifs are, or where the other words that could possibly hint at the horseshoe connective are. Number 6, Bob wants to go to the movies, or Bob won't go to the movies unless Sam and Sue will. Now, unless, 6 and 7, I have unless because it's a very tricky thing in logic, because it's not that easy to symbolize, because if you don't, automatically know, you have to think about, well, what the hell does unless mean? It does mean something, and we can symbolize it. And unless, hopefully you can kind of figure out what the word unless hints at. Unless is, of course, Mr. Good Old Horseshoe. Now, I guess the biggest thing in translating, in kind of showing how to translate from English to SL, is learning about this big guy, because that's the hardest one, and that's where people get lost, and people don't see the words that hint at that connective. So what does unless mean? Unless means if it is not the case that. So unless can be translated, or can be translated into English, if it is not the case that, or if not, just if not too. Now, since we have that unless, you always know that you're going to need the good old tilde also. So if it is not the case. So unless, when put it into terms we can kind of understand for logical reasons, contains the term if. So if, since this has the word if in it, what follows unless is always a part of the antecedent and not the consequent. So if so I'm gonna take I'm gonna assign S for Sam will go to the movies, and T for Sue will go to the movies, and put an ampersand there because Sam and Sue, big time right there. Put parentheses around, or you could distribute it. If it is not the case that, this is just saying that it is not the case that Sam and Sue will go to the movies. Ah, damn, I have shitty tildes today. I apologize for this. Can't write a damn tilde. Okay, now we established our horseshoe, and then what comes here is the part of the consequent. Bob won't go to the movies, and I assign B for Bob goes to the movies. Slap tilde on there. So unless Sam and Sue will go to the movies. So if it is not the case that Sam and Sue go to the movies, then Bob will not go to the movies. So it's just really important to understand what unless means and where it is. Now, when we get down to this one, it's gonna, I guess it's just, I shifted the position of that word. Okay. Unless Bob graduates, then Sue will not graduate. To put it into terms we can understand for logical reasons, if it is not the case that Bob graduates, then Sue will not graduate. Now, whatever follows, again, whatever follows unless is a part of the antecedent. It doesn't matter if it's in the latter part of the sentence. It doesn't matter. Whatever follows unless is a part of the antecedent. So, in translating this, I will assign B to mean that Bob graduates. So, if it is not the case that's what unless means. If it is not the case that Bob graduates, so I'll slap a tilde on there. And we know that again that this has the word if in it, so we get our big good friend horseshoe out. Then Sue will not graduate, so I assign the letter S for Sue will graduate, slap a tilde on there. Now this is probably the most complex one I've given, but these seem really simple. But in English terms, they're not they aren't easy because the words don't always just come through. They have to kind of be shown. Well, hey, this means this, and it kind of has to be given. So that's what it is. If it is not the case that B, then not S. So unless Bob graduates, then Sue will not graduate. Now, finally, number 8. It is necessary that Bob gets an A in order to pass the course. Again, recall this little formulation: sufficient and necessary conditions. The antecedent has to do with the sufficient condition, and the necessary has to do with the consequent. So whatever follows the word necessary is a part of the consequent. If we had the word sufficient here, what follows the word sufficient would be a part of the sufficient conditions. So whenever you see necessary or sufficient in a word, you can always know that it's the big old horseshoe. So it is necessary that Bob gets an A. So I'm going to designate P, a letter P, to that Bob passes the course. So, and then we know it's a horseshoe. And I'll designate A for Bob gets an A. It is necessary that Bob gets an A in order to pass the course. So, if Bob passes the course, then he will have gotten an A, or variations of that. Now, this seems very simple, but it's not that simple when it's in English terms. You just gotta figure out what the words mean and what the words indicate at. So, hopefully you understood this, and hopefully you can see things. If you have a question about this or anything else, then please just tell me. Or if you think I've left something out or done something wrong, especially if I did something wrong with the at most or the at least ones, tell me, because whenever you comment, I get an email, and if your comments are constructive, then I will always respond. So thank you.